Started by Bill Gates' daughter, 23 years old. Look, it has big backers.
Forbes 30 under 30.
What does this latest news mean for this company, which has faced some bad news before?
Some of its business partners have suspended working with them while they carry out deeper investigations.
She said she wanted to build something that had nothing to do with her father's money. She said it on podcasts, in magazine interviews, on stage at Stanford. And now that very company is the reason her name is trending for all the wrong reasons. Internal messages, a Bloomberg investigation, a multi-million-dollar startup, and a legal term most people have never heard of, cookie stuffing, have collided into one of the messiest tech stories of the year. Before we get into what her father may or may not know, let's talk about how Phoebe Gates ended up here in the first place. Phoebe Adele Gates is the youngest child of Bill Gates and Melinda French Gates, and for most of her early life, that was really the headline. Growing up as a Gates meant growing up under a microscope, and Phoebe leaned into the public eye earlier than her siblings did, showing up at fashion events and building a following online well before she had a company to promote. She studied human biology and African studies at Stanford, graduating in 2024, in a ceremony where her own mother gave the commencement speech. It was, by her own description, a strange full-circle moment, closing one chapter of her life while quietly starting another. That other chapter started with a roommate. At Stanford, Phoebe met Sophia Kiani, who had already built a name for herself as a young climate activist. The two of them bonded over a shared frustration. Online shopping was confusing, prices were inconsistent across retailers, and there wasn't a simple tool that helped shoppers find the best deal without digging through a dozen tabs. So they built one. Faya entered beta in late 2024 as a browser extension that scanned thousands of retailers, compared prices, and tried to nudge users toward more thoughtful, sustainable purchases instead of impulse buys. It wasn't pitched as just another coupon app. It was pitched as a smarter, more conscious way to shop. And for a while it worked. Faya picked up real momentum. Gates and Kiani landed on the Forbes 30 under 30 list and Time's Time 100 Next roster. Time later named Faya one of its best inventions, putting two 20-something founders in the same conversation as far more established products. Celebrity names started attaching themselves to the company as investors and backers. Sydney Sweeney, Paris Hilton, Jessica Alba, Karlie Kloss, and Mindy Kaling were all reportedly connected to Faya in some capacity. The company added new features too, including a digital closet tool meant to help users resell clothes they already owned. On paper, it looked like the rare founder story that lived up to its own hype. Two young women building something real, without needing to lean on a famous last name to make it work. Outside of Faya, Phoebe was building a separate public identity too. She spoke openly about reproductive rights and was recognized by Reproductive Freedom for All as a rising reproductive freedom champion. She wrote essays for Vogue and Teen Vogue, appeared at events like Goalkeepers and Global Citizen Now, and in 2025 launched a podcast called The Burnouts with Kiani under Alex Cooper's Unwell Network, where she talked candidly about the anxiety of building a startup in public. She even addressed her father directly in a Netflix documentary, talking about how conspiracy theories aimed at Bill Gates, the vaccine claims, the microchip claims, had bled into her own life and cost her friendships. It was honest, and it painted the picture of someone who had spent years trying to prove she was more than just Bill Gates' daughter. Which is exactly why this next part hits so hard. In July of this year, Bloomberg published an investigation into how Faya's browser extension actually made its money. The findings centered on something called cookie stuffing. Here's the simple version. In affiliate marketing, a company earns a commission when it can prove it referred a customer who then made a purchase. That referral gets tracked through something called a cookie, a small piece of data dropped into your browser during checkout. Cookie stuffing is when that tracking data gets planted even though the company didn't actually do anything to drive the sale, meaning the platform collects a commission it never legitimately earned, sometimes at the expense of the creator or marketer who really did refer the customer. Bloomberg's initial report claimed Faya's extension was doing exactly that, inserting its own tracking identifier during checkout, even in cases where it hadn't influenced the purchase at all. When Bloomberg reached out for comment, a Faya spokesperson gave what sounded like a clean, reassuring answer. The company said it had only discovered the misattribution issue within the previous 24 hours, and that the team had worked through the night to identify and fix it. It was framed as an unfortunate technical glitch, the kind of bug that happens, gets caught, and gets patched. Crisis seemingly averted. Except a second Bloomberg investigation, published in August, told a very different story. According to that follow-up report, which cited internal Slack messages and people familiar with the company, Gates and Kiani had allegedly known about this exact issue since at least December of the previous year. roughly 7 months before Faya claimed it had just discovered it. The reporting described the feature by its internal nickname, something like an auto-drop tool, and said it could reportedly be switched on or off remotely, which raises an obvious question. If it could be turned off at will, was this really an accident, or was it a deliberate part of how the platform operated? One of the more damaging details to surface was a message reportedly sent by Phoebe herself in mid-December, allegedly asking colleagues to confirm the feature was active and running across every supported retail site. If that message is accurate, it becomes very hard to square with the company's later claim that it had only just stumbled onto the problem. According to internal dashboard data cited in the reporting, the feature is said to have remained active for months, right up until the same day Bloomberg first contacted Faya for comment, which understandably fueled speculation that it was switched off specifically because the company knew it was about to be exposed, though the timing alone doesn't prove that was the reason. The financial numbers attached to this are the part that really turned heads. Once the disputed feature was disabled, Faya's average daily revenue reportedly dropped from around $80,000 a day down to somewhere between $10,000 and $28,000. Internal figures cited in the reporting suggested that in June alone, this disputed attribution method accounted for roughly 51% of the merchandise value Faya claimed to have generated. If those numbers hold up, it means this wasn't some tiny rounding error or a handful of misfired transactions. It potentially made up more than half of what the company was telling partners and investors it had earned. Because of how serious that sounds, some legal commentary jumped straight to the scariest possible framing. Attorney Ariel Givner posted publicly that conduct like this is typically treated as federal wire fraud in U.S. courts and can carry a maximum sentence of up to 20 years, along with fines and restitution. That number spread fast across entertainment and business coverage, and it's easy to see why. 20 years in federal prison is a headline that writes itself. But it's important to slow down here. That 20-year figure is a statutory maximum tied to certain wire fraud convictions in general, not a prediction, a charge, or a sentence that has actually been handed down. As of this reporting, no criminal charges have been filed against Phoebe Gates or Sophia Kiani. Allegations reported by journalists are not the same thing as a criminal indictment, and they are absolutely not the same thing as a conviction. Any real criminal case would require prosecutors to prove intent beyond a reasonable doubt, and there's no public indication that a criminal investigation has even begun. What we do know is that the fallout has already been real on the business side. Reporting indicates Faya has started reversing and repaying commissions to affected retailers. Impact.com, the platform that manages a lot of these affiliate payments, reportedly suspended Faya after the second Bloomberg report and began reallocating money that had been scheduled to go to the company. Faya has also pushed back on parts of the reporting and said it's brought on new compliance leadership, while stating publicly that it's committed to reviewing every affected transaction. What the company's public statements have notably not done, according to multiple outlets, is directly confirm or deny whether its founders knew about the issue as far back as December, which is the exact question everyone actually wants answered. Now, about the idea that Bill Gates is furious. Here's the honest truth. There is no verified public statement from Bill Gates about any of this. He hasn't posted about it, addressed it in an interview, or issued any kind of public comment tying himself to his daughter's company or its problems. That silence is exactly why so much online speculation has filled the gap, people assuming what a father in his position must be thinking or feeling, without a single confirmed quote to actually back it up. So if you're expecting a dramatic public statement from Bill Gates himself, that hasn't happened, at least not as of this video. What has happened is a wave of public reaction aimed at Phoebe directly, much of it a lot less measured than anything coming from her father's camp. Online, the reaction has ranged from mockery to genuine anger. A lot of it circles back to one core contradiction. Phoebe spent years insisting that her success would be entirely her own, separate from the Gates name and the Gates fortune. Critics are now pointing out that the name never really left the picture. It's part of why celebrity investors signed on, and it's a huge part of why this affiliate marketing dispute became an international headline instead of staying inside trade publications that cover affiliate marketing. Some commenters have gone further, throwing around claims that dishonesty runs in the family, which is worth being clear about. That's internet commentary, not evidence, and there's nothing connecting this specific business dispute to anyone besides Faya's own leadership and operations. Because that's really what makes this situation different from the conspiracy theory noise Phoebe has dealt with before. The vaccine rumors and microchip claims aimed at her father were baseless and had nothing to do with anything she personally built. This is different. This is a controversy tied directly to decisions reportedly made inside her own company, under her own leadership, about how that company generated and reported the numbers it showed to retailers and investors. So where does this actually go from here? A few different paths are realistic. On the business side, Faya is going to have to work hard to rebuild trust with retail partners and affiliate networks, because the entire affiliate marketing system depends on accurate tracking. Retailers need to trust that the platforms they work with are honest about which sales they actually influenced. If partners believe Faya claimed credit it didn't earn, getting them to sign back on could take a lot longer than fixing the underlying code ever did. On the legal side, there's currently no criminal case, but there is real potential for civil disputes, partner claims, or regulatory scrutiny, especially if more internal documentation comes out. And on the reputational side, this cuts especially deep because Faya built its whole brand around conscious, sustainable, values-driven shopping, which makes allegations of quietly siphoning commissions feel like more than a technical slip-up. It undercuts the actual pitch of the company. There's also the unresolved question hanging over everything. Was this a rushed feature that spiraled out of control, a case of engineers building something without leadership fully grasping the consequences, or a decision company leaders made and stuck with because it was working financially, until the story broke and they had no choice but to shut it off? The internal Slack messages referenced in the reporting suggest leadership had more visibility into this than the original explanation let on, but more visibility and intentional fraud are still two very different things, and only a deeper investigation, or the company's own full accounting, will settle which one this actually was. What's clear is that this story has moved well past a simple tech bug. It's now a test of whether Phoebe Gates and Sophia Kiani can be transparent about what they knew and when they knew it, whether Faya can hold on to the retail partnerships it needs to survive, and whether the brand can recover from a controversy that strikes directly at the ethical shopping identity it built itself around. Bill Gates hasn't said a word publicly and maybe he never will. But his daughter is now facing the kind of scrutiny that has nothing to do with being born into a famous family, and everything to do with the choices made inside the company she built to prove she didn't need that family name at all. So here's the real question worth sitting with. Is this a case of two young founders getting in over their heads with a feature that spun out of control, or a deliberate call to keep a lucrative shortcut running as long as they could get away with it? Drop your take in the comments, and if you want more breakdowns like this one, make sure you're subscribed because this story is very likely far from over.